Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome back to another MMG Let's Play of Sekimeiya. When we left off, we did some stuff we weren't supposed to do, and now Kate is here, and I feel like we're about to ruffle some feathers, to put it lightly. So let's see what happens when we take the Sekimeiya out of the cabinet that we're supposed to leave in the cabinet. As if he'd been summoned, Kate appeared behind the open door. Isla, plainly aware of the impending trouble, instinctively hid the Sekimeiya behind her back, but she wasn't fast enough. "What are you guys doing here? Why is the Sekimeiya out of the cabinet?" "Rather, what were you doing in the security room? Did you find a way to restore the security system or contact the outside again?" "No, nothing worked. I did undo some effects of the alarm, though. The elevator is now functioning and proper illumination has been restored." "Sounds great." "What do you mean, sounds great? Why did you get the Sekimeiya out? I told you how important it is to not remove it from the cabinet." Kate, who looked and was probably rightfully angry, walked toward and forcefully took the Sekimeiya out of Isla's hands. She gave him a blank, depressing look in response. "Important why? What is the higher temperature going to do? It looks perfectly fine to me." Don't tell me it's a real egg, right? It must be kept cold so it doesn't hatch." "Listen, kid. I know you might find this a boring situation and you're trying to stay entertained. However, you should understand how serious this is." It seemed Kate had correctly assumed that it had been Sai's idea. "I don't know what the effects will be. I don't know if they'll happen immediately. But I know one thing. I know that my superiors told me no matter the circumstances, the Sekimeiya could not be taken out of this cabinet, and that while they were saying it, their eyes were as serious as they could have been." "Okay? The cameras here are disabled. I'm sure you can think you can do as you please without facing consequences. For your own good, or for our entire good rather, do not think of doing this again." Kate placed the Sekimeiya back in the cabinet, shut the glass and the curtain, and looked into Sai's eyes as he finished. Sai kept staring back, unfazed, but his expression had slightly changed. If I had to guess what he was thinking, it was probably something along the lines of, "You're one hell of an actor." However, to me, it didn't look like Kate was lying. I didn't rule it out, but I could believe he was very worried the orders he'd just been given weren't being followed, foreseeing punishment he'd be given by the Ashia family. "Yeah, sure." "I don't know why you don't seem able to believe me. I can't tell you everything, but if it's going to make you feel better, I can tell you all I know about the Sekimeiya. Maybe I can earn your trust like this." He didn't only look at Sai, but also the rest of us. Suddenly, he seemed very serious about proving his sincerity. Perhaps he felt that everybody had been suspecting him in some way. "Again, I was told about this very briefly and only have the needed context as part of the security staff. I can't elaborate much on it, but given all that Sudipo said, it's probably fine if I tell you the basic outline I know." Instead of saying anything, everybody stayed silent, intrigued by whatever Kate could have to say. "As you all already know, the Sekimeiya was no more than bait for Sin. After the last time the tower was attacked, on the 24th of November, Ashia began to look for something they could use. Yushibana is now full of people who dedicate their lives to gemstone location and extraction. The number of them increased exponentially when the tower's opening informed people of the valuable gems in the nearby mountains. For many people, going and finding these all around the mountains became a successful gamble. The Sekimeiya was found by a single person who did just that on the 27th of November. Another common practice upon finding rare or valuable gems is informing the Ashia family with hopes that they'll be interested in it. For this reason, we were the first ones to be informed of the Sekimeiya. It worked perfectly for Ashia, as though it was described as very unique. Regardless of its actual value, it did look special, so it was enough to work as the bait that they needed. After paying the original finder for the Sekimeiya and their silence, They purposefully touted the Sekimeiya's value as hard as they could. The first mention of the Sekimeiya by that name was made on the 29th, as you probably know. The Ashiya let everyone hear they were in possession of something incredibly rare and that it'd be shown today on the 15th of December. Every night until today, we had been expecting Sin's attack. Everyone was led to think that Ashiya had the rarest find in a while, so, as Suripo said earlier, regardless of its actual initial worth, after all the publicity, the Sekimeiya was made incredibly valuable for Sin. We sold many tickets for today's events. You all saw how far the line of people extended in the lobby. Upon realizing Sin could pass up on the bait, Ashiya still went with the second option, which was following with what they had said and letting the Sekimeiya they'd praised non-stop be seen. Naomi was instructed into spitting out a bunch of made-up facts about it and its worth during her guided visit to try to justify all the build-up, and add interaction and lengthen the visit time. The visitors were going to touch its surface, but only inside the cabinet. To tell you guys the truth, Sin did actually attempt to steal the Sekimeiya once. Suripo had no reason to inform you of this though, but almost as soon as its existence was announced, Sin made a move for it. As you can see, their plan ended in failure. We even came close to catching someone for Sin for the first time, but they were able to escape. This was almost Ashiya's success, but this information was never published even though it would have been seen as Sin's first failure. The reason was they wanted to keep up the charade and put the plan in motion to catch Sin for real. The Sekimeiya wasn't in this building yet, so the mechanism we had designed wasn't activated. Additionally, even though Sin were the ones who tried to steal it, Ashiya had no way to prove it. Since the circumstances were unusual and everyone knew they wanted to defeat Sin, people would have thought they'd made it all up, as no members had been caught. That's all I can say about this. Now, the cold temperature rule was not something Ashiya realized, but something the original finder instructed. They said that according to the time they'd spent with it, to preserve it and to make sure the Sekimeiya wasn't damaged, it always had to be kept at a cold temperature. The fact that they knew putting it under a higher temperature could damage it implies they did so at one point and noticed the damaging effects. However, as you said, Sai, after you all took it out for a bit, it still seemed to be fine. They probably did the same and realized that leaving it for longer could be harmful. Ashiya did not particularly care, so they naturally accepted and followed that single rule without much of concern. This cabinet, alongside the others that also possessed temperature functions, already existed, so it was a convenient place to keep it after stylizing it a little. Since it was found pretty high up on the mountains behind the tower, the temperature there was already very low. At their request, the location of where it was found was revealed to Ashiya. A vast mountain range surrounding Yushibana, which I'm sure you see daily. On Air Run, a mountain close to this building, there's a little upward path that was much more visible a few years ago. That part of the range has almost been abandoned, because when the reason to go to the mountains switched to gemstone extraction, it was determined that not many were to be found on Air Run. Or Irun? I don't know. Eventually, up the mountain is a small field that's pretty well hidden. It's not easy to spot, and you have to deviate onto a smaller path. All I was told was that it's a fairly hidden place. There, this was found. Kate pointed to the cabinet. That was all interesting and consistent with what we knew, but my mind had gone someplace else. As I expected, when I looked at Shiroya, she was already looking at me. It seems she thought the same thing. Bizarre as it sounded, the location Kate had just described matched perfectly with the place where we used to play as kids. Past that grassy terrain, there used to be a cabin where she and I would frequently visit. It was the same mountain, the same narrow path, and maybe the same plain and grassy field that would now be covered by snow. It seemed pointless to think this much of it. We hadn't been there for more than a decade, but back in the day, it was the perfect hidden place for us to go and spend our time. Not once had we seen anyone else there, but eventually going to the mountains just to play was seen as rude by the people who tried to make a daily living on them. Admittedly, We didn't want to have anything to do with the strangers on the mountain, which decreased the frequency of our visits until we finally stopped going altogether. The final visit was something we hadn't even realized was final. Do you remember? Yeah, of course. I'm not sure the place is the same, but thinking back on those times makes me happy. You're right. We used to have a lot of fun there. Reminiscing evoked a very strange feeling within me. When the weather was ideal, we would spend the entire afternoon in our unreachable hidden place, playing all sorts of different games. We brought things from home every day we went to make it ours. Even though if you were to look at Shiroya, you might not have believed it, her usual self was a very cheerful one, so remembering some of these early memories was bittersweet. On the other hand, after I looked at her, she was smiling, and wore an expression that had lately disappeared from her face. The memories we shared from that time were very special. No matter what I tried to say, I hadn't been able to cheer her up. That might have been the first time in 2 weeks she'd clearly reacted positively to anything, and I probably knew why. Those memories were so old that Mia had not yet appeared in our lives. That was why Shiroya was able to think about them without sparking the negative reactions that obfuscated everything else. Maybe we should go back one day and see what it looks like now. Yeah, that's a good idea. Even though her smile had slightly faded, she seemed to genuinely mean that. It was reassuring to hear and made me trust that everything would eventually get better. I hope so. I really hope so. Kate had kept talking while we'd been digging up old memories, but he'd only gone over his previous points. That's all I know. It's not much, but hopefully you can at least believe me. You sure are good at coming up with stories to cover your butt. It's honestly impressive. Sai said that, but it didn't look like he disbelieved Kate's explanation. He was, most likely, referring to everything else he'd said previously, with the sole intention to provoke him. If that didn't please you, there's not much else I can say. This is probably more than I'm allowed to do, actually. Ah, I see. Even though I could have seen Sai's playful behavior as intriguing earlier, it had come off as off-putting. After shifting my thoughts to some of my childhood memories, the thought of getting out of the tower was much more appealing. Finding out who was responsible for the attack was a goal, but as long as the police had some way to recover the camera footage, they could handle that. They could have already captured the person responsible for all we knew. Ashiya's compensation was clearly a nice thought to keep in mind, though. It was more important to keep an eye out for anyone doing anything suspicious and nail them once we got out than constantly and baselessly accuse anyone in the vicinity like Sai seemed to want to do. Anyway, weren't you all supposed to be investigating the building? I think it's time for that. We keep repeating this, but Naomi's disappearance gets weirder by the second. Yeah, we should go. I agree. Let's look through the first floor first. Or this floor first, my bad. I can't read. It's where she was when the smoke appeared, and it has plenty of disabled cameras. Are we going to find her? Are we actually going to find her? We made our way to hallway A. Finally starting to inspect the huge building was an imposing task. A lot of time had already passed, so I had no idea what to think of Naomi's disappearance. She was either incapable of reaching us or didn't want to. How do we do it? Do we split up? No. Let's make the situation clear first. Funny things can happen later. Funny things? Let's enter every room of this hallway and then move on to the other one. After we're done with this floor, we'll move up one at a time. Yeah, let's begin there. Edina looked at the crystal room in front of the security room. It was the one labeled A1 on the map. Given the floor's layout, if there was someone who wanted to avoid being seen, as long as we didn't split up, they could easily achieve that. There were 3 different ways to make it from one hallway to the other, so we would never be able to rule out a sneaky, moving culprit. Taking that same possibility in mind, though, the thought of splitting up was distressing. It was better to investigate together and hope that it didn't happen. We were in front of the room we'd start with. Kate opened it, and yet again, I felt the same recurring sensation of stepping into a different world. A clean floor, walls, and ceiling awaited us. Just like in the room I'd looked at, there were many cabinets, presumably displaying different kinds of valuable gemstones. Why are they covered? As Isla said, the interior of the cabinets weren't visible. Velvet curtains, as pretty as the Sekimeiya's had once been, were neatly placed over all of them. Oh, I love her little... Is that her question mark? Or is that on the wall? I don't even know. Oh yes, this is something that we would do every morning, except on Sundays, when the tower is closed. Okay? While at 9 o'clock, the floor opens to the public. It isn't until 9:10 that the showcase cabinets are uncovered. This is purely done for dramatic effect, and honestly, to give the visitors the impression that they're about to witness something very valuable. Oh, can I? Yeah, of course. Let me raise them up for you. Okay, yeah, so that question mark is gone. So I was like, is it on the wall, or is it like part of her little cute sprite? In the same manner that Kate must have seen it done daily through the cameras, he carefully rolled up every curtain, letting us see what they were hiding. As amazed as a little girl trapped in a building could be, Isla lit up while Kate uncovered the next mysterious interior. Sai looked at it with a familiar face, even though I couldn't help but question it. The cabinets in those rooms were different from the Sekimeiya's. They were lower to the ground, and on top of them was a screen of glass that sheltered the gemstones. Wow, look at this black one, Mom. It's pretty. I love it. Yes, it's one of my favorites so far. I wish we could wear it as a necklace. We were all glad Elena was with us and treated Isla as if they were in a normal visit, letting her feel comfortable. Shortly, Kate finished with every cabinet. They had all contained gemstones of different shapes and tones. Some also had a brief explanation below them, detailing where they'd been found along with the name of their finder. Most of them assured they'd once been in the mountains I was used to seeing in the background of Yushibana. Despite the events and my lack of interest, I spent some time looking at each one, immersing myself in them without even noticing it. I didn't think it was the best way to spend our time, but everyone seemed to be doing the same. Do you like this one? Shirley was pointing to a tiny light blue jewel with white round stains on the smooth surface. She'd said it because she was looking at it for a while, and she knew that the shade of blue was my favorite color. I really do. I wouldn't mind going to the mountains someday if I could manage to find one like this. I'm sure it wouldn't be easy, but it'd be worth the effort. Yeah. After having talked about going back to our personal playground, I started to really look forward to the time where we'd just visit again, spending a day trying to find a gem as pretty as that one. Can I see it again, Tanya? Huh? Are you talking to me? Yes, can I see your pendant? A bit confused, Shiraya took it out. Tanya? I knew it. It's even prettier than everything in here. What's with the name, though? Tanya? That's you, for Tanzanite. Oh, I see. What? I'll admit I'm a bit fascinated by these myself. Sai's voice sounded from behind us as he peeked over my shoulder. I came here of my own volition, after all. We shouldn't spend so much time doing this in the next rooms, though. We have other priorities. Yeah, sorry, Isla, but once we're done here, we'll have more than enough time to revisit every room. You'll still let me see them, though, right? Yeah, we'll briefly look over them. Okay? We moved on to the next room, which looked almost identical. The same procedure was repeated. Kate uncovered every cabinet, and Isla had a few seconds to appreciate all of the contents. After we finished with it, Akaro spoke. Do we really have to look inside every cabinet? It's only slowing us down. Yeah, it doesn't take up a lot of time, and remember what Suripo said. He mentioned some gems on this floor had been stolen. We need to find out which room it was and see if there's something to notice. Oh yeah, that's true. He did say it happened in one of the farthest rooms. You're right. I'd forgotten about that, but it still sounds very weird to me. What do these gems have to do with anything? It sounded like Ashiya have already assumed they were the goal of the attack, which feels very off considering they didn't even know how they were brought out. You mean to say that they were probably something to divert their attention, right? I agree. If this plan is over or ended in failure, it could be that some kind of trick was used to get them outside, make them believe that they were the goal, and with a lowered guard, steal the actual target, the Sekimeiya. Yeah, something like that. Even though I can't really visualize how that plan would work. before you assume that, there's something to think about which goes against it. What would that be? Well, the 2 vertical hallways in the event room were put out of commission with the smoke. If the gems were the goal, it could be assumed that the event room was, for some reason, only attacked because it's the only way to go from the middle of the hallway to the other. However, that has a flaw. Even though a function of the smoke was certainly to disable the security cameras, the room those gems were stolen from wasn't ever subjected to the smoke, according to what Kate told us. This is very strange, don't you think? It outright implies that the room's security camera was never a factor they took into consideration. So, if that were the case, why did they disable all the others? What I mean to say is that the robbery of those gems could have been executed without some need of releasing the smoke in the event room, and that the substance to cover the lenses of the security cameras wouldn't have been needed. If being spotted by the security cameras in the room of the robbery wasn't an issue, it means that the only goal of the smoke was to provide a clear route to the outside. The event room and the opposite hallway wouldn't have been needed, and disbanding the cameras would have definitely been pointless. This immediately indicates that the gems were never the goal, which breaks the effect. Maybe you're right. If they were the goal, only one hallway and that one very room would have been attacked. Oops, wrong button. Yes, you also can't assume that the smoke was released to make everybody nearby fall unconscious, because not all the rooms where people could have been were attacked. And yet they were brought outside in a suitcase before the exit closed. Yeah, only for the person to be arrested immediately. I can't quite figure out what the whole deal is here, more so given the Sekimeiya is still with us. The people outside think the gems were the goal and that the robbery was a failure. However, part of that relies on them not knowing the exact rooms that were attacked by the smoke. I'm sure more people will conclude what I'm saying once they enter the tower. If the culprit intended to pass those gems as a fake goal, this plan is lacking. There's no way it ends with someone sneaking the Sekimeiya out as soon as the exit opens, right? That would be very stupid. Not to mention that stealing the gems would be rendered useless since Ashia could quickly notice that the Sekimeiya had been stolen too. Then the gems would ultimately return to Ashia and the person who had them would be arrested. I hadn't taken those gemstones into consideration for any of my thoughts, but he was right. Hey, Kate, I know you said this earlier, but are you sure that the exit was sealed immediately after the alarm went off? While it is the first time the alarm has been activated, it's how it was programmed to work. Anything else would have been pointless, really. Could it have been another malfunction? I was just thinking that perhaps Naomi brought the gems out. Naomi? But that would be impossible, right? Not if the malfunction actually occurred. When Sudipal mentioned the person who brought them outside, he had only said it had been an individual. It could have been a woman. And I think he would have said when we mentioned Naomi was still with us. If the alarm's effects had been delayed, Sudipal would have brought it up, or someone from the outside would have entered. It is true, though, that Naomi, the person who should be here but isn't, and knows the layout of the tower well, is a good candidate to have brought those gems out, acting out this ridiculous role of being purposefully arrested with a conspicuous suitcase. If this is what happened, targeting the event room would make sense, even if the goal was elsewhere. It was Naomi's location, and she would have needed a way to escape. You're right. I hadn't thought of this, but I'm not convinced. Targeting both hallways still wouldn't make much sense, and most importantly, it implies her plan only worked because the alarm's effects got delayed. It would have been no malfunction. Yeah. Also, we still don't know what actually triggered the alarm, and while I could be wrong, it really seemed to me like Naomi did fall unconscious in our room. Remember what Sudipal said? If anyone was in front of the shutter and it closed, it would have stopped. It's possible it was delayed, which gave Naomi enough time to leave even though she was in the event room when the alarm played. That's true, but Sudipal would have told us as well. Wait, no, I don't think that could have happened. Why not? When I heard the alarm, there was another sound too, much fainter. I just realized that must have been the shutter closing, as it was rough and came from the lobby. That means the effect couldn't have been delayed, and it ended with a louder sound, which must have been it hitting the floor. I'm pretty sure it went all the way without stopping. If that's true, it confirms Naomi's still here. Yeah. Is this a key? I saw Shidoya staring at the floor, confused as to where to direct her gaze. Oh, you're right. What's this doing here? When we went quiet, the two people who hadn't participated in the conversation spoke. They were a bit ahead of us, so we walked to them. After focusing the point where they were staring, we saw that Isla had found. Next to the right wall was a small, rusty key. Isla kneeled to pick it up. Once in her hands, she showed it to us. Was this on the floor? Yeah, I just saw it. There's no way we'd have missed this until now, right? The color's so close to the floors and the lighting's bad. I'd say we did, since it took me a few seconds to see it. Really? It was right next to the event room. More importantly, what's it for? Do you recognize it, Kate? No, I don't think I've ever seen this key before. That's not good. Kate grabbed it to give it a closer look. It appeared very old and rusty, not the kind of key that would be used in a modern building. It's impossible this belongs here. I know it's an old building and there are keys that I don't possess, but this must be for something else. Keys are not prohibited items in this tower. It's possible someone dropped it and didn't realize it. How would you not realize it? If you drop it here, the noise would alert you. For sure. Which means that whoever dropped it and realized it didn't pick it back up. It would have been a bit ridiculous to think that it would have been left purposely to indirectly pass it on to someone or something of the sort. Given what we knew had happened so far, Sai's words made a lot of sense. You get what I mean, right? This key probably belonged to the culprit. As they were running against a timer that would trap them, this key was dropped. Naturally, they didn't waste time stopping to retrieve it. It could be a pretty important key if it's the one the culprit was holding when they were committing a crime. I'll keep it safe and give it to the police as soon as I can. That's a good idea. You might be jumping to conclusions again, though. This could belong to an innocent person who rushed to escape from the tower. You think so? I'm not sure that's possible. I've gone over this. Why would an innocent person ever rush to escape? One reason would be if they saw smoke appearing out of nowhere. However, they would have fallen unconscious if they ran through the hallway. The other reason would be if they heard an unknown alarm, but this can also be ruled out because the alarm blocked off the exit. Naturally, this key doesn't belong to any of us, right? Nobody answered. He was saying that there was no innocent person aware of the danger who could have escaped the hallway. If the key didn't belong to the culprit, it had to belong to someone who had also gotten trapped and we hadn't seen. Even Naomi didn't make sense as a candidate. I'd been with her up until the alarm had sounded. If someone had fallen unconscious there, they would have dropped the key and failed to realize it upon waking up. Perhaps even the sound of the drop had been obfuscated by the alarm. Of course, though, that was very unlikely. I doubt this was here before the attack. There was a janitor cleaning the floor in the lobby, so I'm sure these hallways are clean today too. On the surface, that appeared to be a very solid argument, but there was a way around it, and it involved something I'd thought before. We didn't know for a fact that the smoke in the hallway A had been released at the same time as in the other two places. There was no reason to believe it hadn't been, but it would have also let one of Kate's claims be truth. One part of me wanted to directly ask Kate, but I held off. If someone else heard yells coming from the lobby, or seen smoke coming through the door of the event room, they must have rushed out without stopping to retrieve their key. I recalled that while we'd been about to fall unconscious, I heard nothing but silence. I saw Isla in front of the next door. Even though it had been her discovery, she didn't seem very interested. The private revelations of the cabinet's contents were probably very exciting for her instead. Let's continue for now. If this was important for the culprit, it's likely they'll try to get it back, so I'll make sure to keep it safe until we get out. We accepted that and moved on. The next room was no different from the previous. Kate went ahead and began to make sure nothing had been stolen from its cabinets. Sai approached me while I was separated from the others. Anticipating his reason, I was first to speak. Do you still doubt Kate? I think he did a good job of proving his sincerity. Oh, of course I still do. I do agree that he's pretty good at lying. You already realized he was never in the security room, right? Why are you defending him? I looked at Kate. He was putting up with Isla and acting interested in gyms he'd presumably seen hundreds of times. Are you certain he wasn't? He couldn't have been there after the alarm went off. The suspension timer confirmed it. The only other possibility is that he was there and lied about using the computer, but that doesn't make it any better. Have you considered that the computer time might not have been accurate? The computer time? Yeah, if it was wrong, Kate would have had the time to be there without lying. To then lie about how much time he spent outside it. Yeah, I know. Maybe you're right and there's no other explanation. I have considered the computer time being wrong, and not only that. Sai raised his sleeve. Under it, there is a digital wristwatch. I always wear this. It doesn't seem like there are wall clocks anywhere, so time displayed on the computer is the only source we have available. Besides my wristwatch, that is. My time and the computer's are the same. I see. So it can't be that either. Well, as I said, I didn't consider that the computer time might have been wrong, but rather that someone went way further than that. Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah, that should be the only way out Kate has. Yes, if someone messed with my wristwatch while I was unconscious, they could have made it back up the computer's time. That's going too far though. After all, one would only do this to frame Kate into not having been in the room. But it's too ridiculous to consider it seriously. They need to know that Kate would say everything he said to then contradict it with the computer's suspended state, risking the possibility of nobody noticing it. And not only that, but it's also something that only works with the people who got trapped. This wouldn't mean anything if we brought it up to the outside, so imagining that someone would set it up isn't reasonable. And Kate, who didn't fall unconscious, would have called out the wrong time, since he didn't do it if it was truly wrong. He must have been the only one to modify it. Then, as an effect, his truthful claims would have sounded impossible. That's still ridiculous and doesn't clear his name at all. He also let us talk to Suripo, who could have mentioned the time at any moment. But why would Kate lie about having been in the security room? Do you actually think he's responsible? Or heavily involved in some way? There's no way he's not hiding anything or looking to gain something. So, you don't believe his story about how the Sekimeiya was found. You're accusing him of lying to us about that too. Oh no, I do believe everything that he said there. It just strengthened his motive further. Huh? I still think the Sekimeiya has to be at the core of all this. It has to be right. Now, don't you find it strange that the simple security member would know all that? He said it in a desperate time because he wanted to earn our trust, which is why he relied on factual truth to lessen our suspicion. But what I think he did was change his own perspective. I'm telling you this in case you realize I'm missing something, but I think all he did was join his version with what Suripo told us to form an accurate story and pass it off as something that Ashia told him. I don't follow. I'm saying that he could be the original finder of the Sekimeiya. He didn't want to know what Suripo told us before he did. Otherwise, he would have said it to earn our trust. Once he knew about Suripo's factual story, he joined his own knowledge with it to make us believe he truly works in the tower. The way he detailed some things was very questionable. He knew the exact location where the Sekimeiya was found, and everything he told us was information the original finder would have known after hearing Suripo's story. That might be true, but it sounds like a pretty big assumption. Didn't he say the finder was already paid? I'll tell you one of the theories I formed. It's all speculation, yes, but I think it could make sense given whoever's behind this already went pretty far with all the smoke. I haven't told you this since it might not mean anything. Both of us showed up early and were at the front of the line for a while, in front of the hallway B door. Yeah, we didn't have a way to check the time, but we were definitely there for a few hours. Alright, so it was approximately at 8. I saw Kate in the lobby. The reason why I started questioning him so quickly was because when I first saw him, he was wearing normal clothes. Of course, back then, I didn't think anything of it. I didn't know what he did either. I just saw him for a few seconds, and if anything, I'm certain he was never part of the line. Considering everything, I think it is one of the ways that everything could have played out. Take whatever you want from it. The person claiming to be called Kate found the Sekimeiya a couple weeks ago. He contacted the Ashiya family, and given their interest, they bought Kate's discovery. At no point did Kate expect they'd set up so much advertisement for his own find. It's possible Ashiya said things that were wrong only to draw people in, and perhaps not being credited as the finder bothered him. As a motive, I'll admit it's pretty plain, but at some point, Kate could have realized the value of what he had found, and that he had been paid for had increased exponentially. That's why he designed a plan to retrieve something he thought he'd been cheated out of. The scale of the attack seems too big to have been designed by a normal person who found a rare gemstone in a mountain, but many things line up nicely. At 8 a.m., on the day of the Sekimeiya was going to be shown to the public, he entered the tower. This is why it happened during daylight. Sin is, for once, not behind it. They had tried to steal the Sekimeiya once and failed. I don't know how his plan worked, so I can't tell if the alarm was an intended factor for it, but regardless of that, this person went to meet the actual Kate Kuji. I don't know how, since the doors haven't been open to the public yet, but he wasn't in the lobby shortly after I saw him. By speaking to Kate, he could have learned a lot about the alarm's existence and the method to contact the outside. The way he learned that information isn't important. What matters is that he put on Kate's clothes. Then he proceeded to hide Kate somewhere out of the camera's reach. The way he did all of this can vary greatly, but Kate was charged with keeping track of the security cameras, so obviously nobody could have seen him carrying off a body that was the one supposed to be seeing it. Along with the clothes, he also took the security room key. Then he released the smoke in the two hallways in the event room through some method I'm unaware of. It's likely he knew he'd get trapped by doing so. He acted as if he'd found us and played the role of security member to justify his presence in the tower. Naomi. It's possible he hid her body while she was unconscious. He'd be the one to have a reason because Naomi would have revealed that he doesn't work in the tower. By saying everything was confidential, he managed to avoid explaining anything he didn't know. He lied about having been in the security room, since instead, he'd been carrying out his plan of his. This is why he knew things only a person inside the room with all the monitors would have known without actually having been there. Sudipo said it clearly. The security staff, upon hearing the alarm, would stay in the room and relay information through the installed microphone. But Kate told us that he left it because he didn't know about that before talking to Sudipo. He said he used the microphone while we were unconscious, but I'm sure he was lying. I don't know why he let us talk to the outside, but it's possible he had something to gain from that. Maybe he wanted everyone outside to think that Kate Kuji really is in the tower and that everything here is going well. Maybe he wanted to make sure that the bait gemstones worked and that he tricked Ashiya. I don't know how all of this works yet. As I said earlier, that part of the plan seems to be very poorly constructed. It almost feels unrelated to what he did, but that can't be it. Anyway, it all comes down to he had no way to get the Sekimeiya out without spending 12 hours here, so he's intentionally spending 12 hours here. I don't know how this plan ends. I have no idea how he intends to get the Sekimeiya out once the exit opens, but consider the following. If he manages to do it, nobody will miss him. None of us will know who he actually was. I'm only speculating that he was the original finder of the Sekimeiya to give an easy answer to the questionable knowledge he's had since the start. Once he makes it out, only the Sekimeiya will be missing. Kate Kuji will still be here, since he's the person talking to Isla right now hid him. What? Since he's where the person talking to Isla right now hid him, the ghost of a person will have escaped with the real target. Okay, after saying it all out loud, I know it sounds pretty absurd, but whatever the plan is, it still has to be far from over. There are a lot of things that don't make sense, and somehow, the Sekimeiya is still in its cabinet as if nothing happened. Also, one last thing. Sure, Sai, just keep on talking, buddy. We only think that we saw the Sekimeiya because Kate told us so. The plan could already be at a higher stage. The real Sekimeiya could have been replaced while we were asleep. That could be another reason why Naomi's presence had been taken care of, as she would expose that illusion. I'm done. What do you think? Do you agree with anything? Oh my god. I was looking at the floor and I've been listening to everything expressionlessly. Kate remained engaged with Isla while her mother looked from behind. Akaro and Shiroya were leaning against the wall, waiting to move on. Before I responded, we all walked to the next room, A4. Okay, that was a lot of text and a lot, like, this game, people think a lot. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. There's a lot of exposition and not a lot of conversation. It's just like talk, not back and forth. Does that make sense? Either way, I'm going to go ahead and leave this episode here and we'll find out what happens next time. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know if you enjoyed. I'll see you guys on the next MAMJ. Lots of fun.